It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome, welcome. It's the Jill on Money Show. It is the last weekend of April. I can't even believe it. It's almost as if time goes by so quickly, and yet every day is dreadfully long, isn't it? It is almost 8 weeks since we really started talking about coronavirus, and the questions that you guys are sending are fantastic. I mean, just amazing. So we are so grateful that you are taking the time to write to us. This is a program that is supposed to take the mystery out of your financial life. Right now, we're just trying to hold your hands a little bit. We're trying to give you wise advice and try to take the temperature down a little bit on all of the anxiety you might be feeling. Jill on Money, we are broadcasting from the Capital One virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? We truly, truly cannot believe that things like this happen, but they do. And let's talk about this. Let's talk a little bit about the oil market, because maybe this will be a quick way to explain this to everybody. During the week, you probably read a headline that crude oil traded at a negative price. It seems impossible, but here's why it is possible. Just think about it this way. Crude oil is a futures contract. Right this second, when the May contract went negative, there's really no market for crude oil. So, reason is obvious that we are in a global recession. Nobody wants oil. That's kind of clear. And, I looked up some numbers just to put this a fine point on this. By April 10th, consumption of U.S. petroleum dropped to the lowest level in 30 years. Demand for gas has declined by nearly half since mid-March. Jet fuel consumption has plunged by 70%. And meanwhile, oil's piling up. It's got no place to go. So as a result, when May contract was coming up to actually roll off, people were saying, well, I can't sell any of my May crude oil. Therefore, I would actually have to pay somebody to come take it from me and store it someplace. So that said, as soon as the May contract was expiring, the contract for June delivery came into wide view. And, it seems to me that we shouldn't be surprised if, in fact, we are looking at the oil market and understanding that in the future, demand for oil will likely start to rise later in the year, right? Not now. And when we get to that point, that will be fantastic, but we're not there yet. So what's the best way to think about this? It's like, just use common sense, that you say to yourself, okay, crude oil right now, nobody wants it. Later in the year, someone might want it. So what does that mean? It means something that's kind of neat in the world of trading. It's called contango. It means that oil in the future is priced higher than it's priced today. So if I go out and say, what's the price of crude oil for October delivery? That's like $28 a barrel. But right now, the new June contract is closer to $14 or $15 a barrel. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because who wants oil right now? But later we might. So there's your explanation of crude oil prices. Don't get too freaked out about it. Unfortunately, with gas prices low, it doesn't even matter because we're not driving anywhere. All right. So hopefully that is, you understand that. If not, give me a holler. And if you've got a financial question, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. That's what Jimmy did. He says that he writes, we are lucky to be working from home. I'm in IT. My wife is a tax accountant. Kids ages 3 and 6 with no daycare payments, deferred student loan payments. Is this a good time to make extra efforts to pay down our debts? We're thinking about refinancing our mortgage to get those monthly payments down to make more progress. We could lower our mortgage interest rate by approximately 1% with one of these options. So let me just go. There's a bunch of options for the mortgage, but hang on 1 second, okay? Here we go. They've got credit card debt, real credit card debt. Credit card debt, 5 different cards with, let's see, 12, 24, 34, 40. There's like $53,000 of credit card debt. Forget about the mortgage for a second. Yes, absolutely, positively, what you should be doing right now is tackling that credit card debt. And you should be doing that aggressively. Okay. So, one of the things that I think is really important here is to figure out what makes sense for you guys. And what makes sense to me is okay, you can actually refinance your mortgage just to free up your cash flow. But I'm less interested in that. I really am mostly concerned with trying to get a jump on this credit card debt. So you also write that you've got, let's see, cash of 15,000 is not that much money. Here's what I think. Don't do anything with your loan for your house because your interest rate is 4.1%. That's fine. I mean, to me, I don't know, like you got closing costs, don't worry about that. Let's use all of your available cash flow to pay off your debt. Start with the highest interest, work your way down. And let's see how you do on that because I'm not sure it makes a ton of sense for you to go out and just, refinance willy-nilly. There is one caveat that I would actually put on this recommendation. And that is that you say that your house is worth a lot more than what you paid for it 5 years ago. I'm wondering if you might feel comfortable doing this. Instead of refinancing to get a lower monthly payment, how would you feel about refinancing, taking out a little bit more money on that loan and paying down some of your higher interest credit card debt? How would you feel about that? Um, I know that that's a hard thing to swallow for a lot of people, but to me, that could be a way out of this debt entanglement that you're in. I also would love it if you could follow up with me and tell me, how is it that you have so much credit card debt? What's going on here? Um, Again, I'm just eyeballing this. You've got a house loan at 380,000. Could you take out, could you say have a $425,000 note and pay off a lot of this credit card debt in one fell swoop and just keep making those payments? That to me might be your best bet. And it's a tough decision to make. And I would only make it if I understood why you were actually in that credit card debt to begin with. So let me know what you think about that. This is not an easy decision to make. It is an important one, though, and you may have a really good opportunity to reduce your overall debt load. Okay, it's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, you can just send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. You can also go to the website, jillonmoney.com. We've got a contact button right there, and you can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Hang on, we'll be right back with more of your questions.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And if you can't get enough of us, well, I'll tell you what Mark and I have done. Over a month ago, we made our podcast, which is also called Jill on Money. We made that into a daily show. So you don't have to wait just for the weekend. I mean, the weekend show is different. We have like a little bit more of a chill vibe here. But if you'd like to hear a little bit more of the up to date information and all the questions that we're answering every single day, subscribe to our podcast. It is called Jill on Money. You can get it on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, radio.com, Google Play, anywhere else you find your favorite podcasts. And if you don't know how this works, it's really very easy. I mean, for many of you, you might have an iPhone. All you have to do is click on the little icon and it will just poof, it'll be there for you. It's so fantastic. It's a purple icon. It says podcasts. And then you search for Jill on Money. Isn't that easy? See, I told you it was easy. All right. Let's get to more of your questions. Here is a note from Derek. Hey, Jill, I started listening to your podcast after the 404 ended. That's the CNET show that was fantastic. And he says, I needed my Aunt Jill's advice. We've already refinanced our house in the middle of March to take advantage of lower interest rates. We were able to shave about 5 years off our mortgage by going to a 20-year and save about $50,000 in interest. We only added about $25 to our payment. He writes, I also got suckered into a new truck loan, something I was going to do anyway soon. My question is this. Is refinancing something you would recommend at this time? I've been hearing a lot about taking advantage of lower interest rates and I jumped on it, but now I wonder if I should have waited. No, 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 no. Don't go back in time. You did a great job, Derek. And these are all these rates, they're going to fluctuate. If you made it work for you, then kudos to you. Fantastic. Don't worry. You're in good shape. Okay. Ken writes, I read your column in the East Bay Times on April 6th, but it was a little late for me since I had already taken my 2020 required minimum distribution in late February. I checked all the available information on this topic, but I'm still unclear on the following. Okay, so here's the question. 1. So just to remind everybody, required minimum distributions for the year 2020 are suspended. You do not have to take your money out of your retirement account, and you don't have to double up on your RMDs for next year. So it's just like a year of a pass. So number one question, if you've already taken that RMD, does it have to be rolled back into a traditional IRA, or can it be rolled into a Roth IRA if I and my spouse do not have any earned income? Well, it has to go back into the old IRA. And if you wanted to convert from a traditional IRA into a Roth IRA, that's a different question. Question 2 here, does the entire amount have to be rolled back? Okay, here's what I think it has to do. Yes, you have to put everything back in the same institution in the same way, and you should call them and say, can I do this? Now, I don't know if you can go back into the same investment funds. That I don't know. You might have to go back into cash. But in your case, you wouldn't want to make any changes anyway because you pulled your money out in February before the market cratered. So that's kind of cool. So I would call the institution where the money is held. Then the question of, do you want to actually convert to a Roth IRA is a different question. Because remember, there are a lot of rules about conversion, and I'd need to know more about what's going on for you in your life. Okay, so let's make sure that we take care of that. Here's another question about required minimum distributions from Richard. And he says, as you know, the CARES Act waived required minimum distributions from qualified accounts for 2020. The waiver applied to both the normal RMD and an initial RMD. Here's my question. Will a person who would have had to take 2 RMDs in 2020 have to do 2 in 2021? No. The answer is no. So here's the deal. What's going to happen is you are going to have to take a required minimum distribution in 2021 based on the retirement value as of December 31st, 2020. That's it. It's going to be 1. It's as if the year 2020 never happened for your required minimum distributions. That's the best way to think about it. It's very confusing, though. I hate the whole RMD rule. I think it's sort of a dumb rule the way it's written, and it's oddly confusing. So I'm glad that at least that, we don't have 70 and a half anymore. That's now 72. Ay, ay, ay. All right, here's a question From Jeff, who writes that my sister recently passed away from breast cancer at age 64. Oh, God, terrible. I've been handling her estate. It includes a house we co own, and it's currently on the market. I also inherited her 401k, which is valued at $180,000. I have questions about the best options for distribution, especially considering the current withdrawal penalty holiday due to the pandemic. Okay. So, Jeff, um, the yeah, okay. For an inherited 401k, the rule that was changed at the end of last year, which is not pandemic related, is that you've got to pull the money out over the course of 10 years. Now, you don't have to pull it out in lockstep 1/10 every year. So it's a slightly different calculation. So I'm not sure that you're going to have an actual holiday. I think you can just wait to take the money out. On the other hand, maybe you would like to take some of the money out right now because the values are lower and you can take the money out and there will be tax due. So that's something to consider. Maybe that's a good idea for you. If you'd like, follow up with me so we can find out what's going on in your life. Remember, the money that you are pulling out of an inherited IRA, it has to be taken out over the course of 10 years if you're not the spouse. And that money doesn't have to be actually taken out 1/10 a year for 10 years, but it has to be depleted 10 years after the date of death. That said, the money will be taxable to you at your tax bracket when you take it out. So if you are in a low tax bracket right now, it may behoove you to withdraw the money sooner rather than later. So we just got to check in on you with that to make sure that that makes sense. Okay? All right. Okay. Here is oh, that's a long question, Mark. Very long question. Let's see. That's another long question. I can't do that. Okay, this is better. Sharon writes, due to a recent divorce, I now own a single family home and make the monthly payments to Bank of America. The conventional mortgage loan outstanding is about $200,000. Due to legal requirements, I need to remove my ex's name from the loan. I applied to assume that loan and meet their excellent credit rating and have assets that are nearly double the value of the loan. The home is worth $300,000, but I didn't meet their debt to income ratio criteria and I was declined. Are there lenders who could be more flexible, or are there current government programs that would provide support? I would definitely shop this around. I would go find myself a very good mortgage broker who could help you out. It's insane that they won't write this mortgage, Sharon, but it's not surprising. You know, these banks, they're so they go so much like in a formula in the box. But I think you're going to have plenty of options to refinance, and it would seem to me that all you have to do is be a little bit more careful about finding a broker with whom you could work, who could really help customize something for you. And there are plenty of them out there. If you need some help, let us know. We can send you the name of somebody or a few different people to help you out. All right. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. That's askjill@jillonmoney.com. During the break, hop onto the website, jillonmoney.com. We've got great resources for you, all these different programs from the CARES Act. We kind of try to break them down. All right. We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a question, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. You know what I've been thinking about, Mark? I've been thinking about, if I had a college-age kid, would I want to send that kid back to school right now? You know, like knowing what I know now. Mark says no. I know, I don't think I would either. I mean, I don't have children, so I don't have to make this decision. I also am not sure that as we rethink college, are you really gonna wanna spend 25 to $75,000 a year to have your kid do remote learning? I don't know. I feel like that's a tough one. I don't know. I'm gonna be watching these colleges. I think some colleges are gonna go broke. I do, because I just don't think there's gonna be as many people who wanna do this. Crazy, right? All right. This is a email from LC. Hi, Jill. I'm always learning from your expertise on the podcast. Thanks for sharing. Best wishes to you and all the brothers and sisters in New York who are going through so much right now. We're all holding hands from a distance. I love that sentiment, which is great. Okay. So here was what Elsie says. Everyone is so paranoid about losing money during this thing going on. I have no complex questions like many of your followers, but I thought I might chime in. I've found a surefire way to get a guaranteed return. It's so simple. If you have some cash, like I happen to, simply pay down debt that has higher interest rates. Well, we talked about that earlier in the show. This week, in fact. Okay, LC says I'm early 60s, approaching retirement and comfortable. I've got a mortgage with several years left at 3.25%. And I started to make some additional principal payments on it since the stock market went for a swim. Whenever the market settles, I can simply adjust or reallocate accordingly to get the most bang for the buck. Fortunately, I have no other consumer debt, but I just think so many folks that have credit card debt staring down at them with a 15% plus interest rate. What a return that would be. In the short term, that sure beats the heck out of any current CD or savings anywhere. I've got all the fundamentals in place. 6 months of an emergency reserve fund, 40% stock, 60% bond allocation in my Roth IRA, minimal losses due to prudent investing. I never try to hit a home run like many seem to think they're going to, and they miss out on the next big thing. Slow and steady base hits for me, and over time, I've been well rewarded. It works. What do you think? LC, I think you are just really reading from the Jill on Money playbook. I couldn't agree more. So often, people will be looking to say, just like, oh, I want to make a quick buck or I want to try to catch this thing that's happening. You don't have to. You don't have to. You can be prudent. And as LC says, just stick to a pretty simple game plan and you're going to be fine. Okay. All right. This is from Sarah. My company's employee stock purchase plan re enrollment and purchase date is April 30th. I'm wondering if I should increase my contributions from my current 5% to the full 10% allowed and then sell them in 6 months when they mature for a 15% gain. Keep that in mind, okay? 15% gain. I'm an airline pilot. I'm planning on a furlough through October 1st. My airline applied for money under the CARES Act, which means they can't furlough me until October 1st. It's great as it gives me time to save aggressively for 6 months. I realize my company stock purchase might be a way to save, but maybe I'm missing something. Yeah. You know what you're missing? Because you don't know whether the stock is going up 15%. I get it. You buy the stock at a discount, at a 15% discount. But what if this company goes broke, which, by the way, you work for an airline? It could. So here's what I would do. I'd put 0% in your employee stock purchase plan, and I would sock away as much money as I could into my savings account. That's what I would do. Everybody has got to stop this nonsense about thinking you're going to outsmart the universe. Yes, of course, you get to buy the shares at a discount, but that presumes the stock goes up later. The downside is that this company could go broke. That's the downside. And it's so clear to me that we human beings, I tell you the truth, we're an optimistic bunch. I just wrote about this actually because I put on the website because I woke up very early one day during the week and I went back and I said, you know what we do? We all underestimate the hits that we're going to take. And I started looking this up because I said, let me go back to March to what I was writing and what I was hearing from economists. And then I went into real time, and everybody is now in a different place, right? And what's fascinating to me is that when we are looking at our own situation, we tend to have what's called the optimism bias. And we overestimate our likelihood of experiencing good events. And we underestimate the likelihood of bad things happening, you know? And I found this neuroscientist, her name is Tali Sharot, and she said, we're more optimistic than realistic, but we are oblivious to the fact. And that is why we do things like this, think that we're going to buy our stock and it will go up. We have been fielding questions, you might be surprised to learn, of people who were shocked that when they looked at their company stock that they purchased 6 months ago at a 15% discount, that they were underwater even with the 15% discount. And now what do? And you're in the airline industry, for God's sakes, where we could have a nationalized airline where the government may own warrants in your airline. Could you make a killing? Sure. Is that risk worth it? No. Please, please don't do this. If you think that you will be furloughed, the best thing you can do is to save as much money as you possibly can in non-risk assets. That means savings, checking, a short-term CD. That's about it. If you've got 12 months of savings that's already in the bank, then go ahead and pay down some high-interest debt. But I don't even care, man. Just be really risk averse right now, okay? Whew, that was a little bit of a rant. You're listening to Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger helps you take the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you have a question about this crazy time, this insane time, and how it's impacting your money, your financial life, or even the economy overall, give us a holler. Our email address is askjill at jillonmoney.com. Very easy, right? And also, I want to encourage you guys to check out our daily podcast, the Jill on Money Coronavirus Market Update. You can get that anywhere you get your favorite podcast. So check it out. Just search for Jill on Money. Okay, here we go. This is from Ramona, who says, thanks for all you do. Some good news in all this craziness going on. My husband just got a 4% raise. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. So here's what's going on for them. They already max out his 403B. He works for a hospital. And they also max out the health savings account. So here's question one. Is there anything else we can do to help us reduce our tax load straight from his paycheck? I mean, I guess, I don't think so. I mean, you're kind of doing what you can do. The question is number two, and I wouldn't worry too much about, I mean, depending on how much he makes, I wouldn't go crazy also about depending on your tax bracket, maybe you shouldn't be worried that much about reducing that taxable income. Okay, two, I've heard it's a good practice to save or invest any raise amounts. How do you do this if your taxes continue to go up each time you get a raise? For example, he gets a 4% raise. Some of that will be taxed. I'm eligible to put more money into my 457 403B, which we have not been able to max out fully yet. We have no children, no mortgage interest, and no major deductions. So we take the standard. Oh, okay. So this is easy now. So if you really want to do it, then, you're filing jointly. So all you have to do is up your amount into your 457 or 403B. It doesn't have to be straight on his salary. You're filing jointly. So to me, that's the easiest way to get more money saved. Okay? No worries. Adam writes, that he's read some articles I've written about index funds. He says it seems there are two ways that index funds deal with dividends. They either pay them to the investor or they reinvest them. Okay, so this is true that when you buy any mutual fund, forget about an index fund, you can take the dividends as a payment to yourself. You say, okay, instead of reinvesting the dividends, instead of repurchasing shares, just send me the money. Or you can automatically have those dividends reinvested in the fund itself. So if you don't need the money, it's always better because, frankly, you're buying shares, you continue to buy shares over time. Adam writes, I have encountered index funds that do it differently. The funds say they add dividends to the overall value of assets owned by the fund. So they pay no dividends or they give no additional certificates. They just increase the value of the certificate. Is this a scam? I don't know if it's a scam. I don't know about that. If you do me a favor, just follow up with me and send the fund that you're contemplating, and then we can take a look at it. Okay, here we go. This is from Nancy. Hi, Jill and Mark. Love your show. You speak my language, and I mean in terms I can understand. My question is about the stimulus check. I'm one of the unlucky ones still waiting. I did not submit a tax return yet for 2019, but I did for 2018. The problem is I used H&R Block software, which from what I understand, the IRS does not have my direct deposit information. I'm reading conflicting things. What should I do to get my stimulus check? Thank you and stay safe. Now this is very interesting because there was a lot of confusion because so many people were worried that for some reason, and this could be lots of different reasons, by the way, that the government did not have their direct deposit information. In response to that, the Treasury Department said that they have launched a new free app, and it's called Get My Payment. Okay, they introduced this on April 15th. And the tool allows you to make sure that your direct deposit information is there for the government. So you will get that payment. And I think that if you were to do that, that will expedite your payment and hopefully, and I didn't hear about the H&R Block thing, but I think a lot of people are in a similar situation, Nancy. So thank you for actually writing because that gave me a chance to remind people that that's there. Um, the funny thing about those checks, it's so weird. Like in 2018 or 2019, I might have been fully employed and not needed the money. But if I lost my job today and I'm screwed, I need the payment. So I don't know. We've got some crude systems here. So we'll have to figure that out, I guess, at some point in the future. But hopefully that helps you, Nancy. All right, you are listening to Jill on Money. During the break, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to our website, jillonmoney.com. And there you can read in on all the stuff that I've put out there or listen to past shows and maybe watch a TV segment. It's be a quick break, but you could do a lot on the website. Just go to jillonmoney.com. And while you're there, if something kind of niggles at you, you got a question, we've got a contact button. It's in the upper right-hand corner of the website. And just click on it and you can make sure that we get your message quickly. Please know that we had to go to a daily podcast to start answering them all. Okay. It's Jill on Money, and we will be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. And before we close out the hour, I want to remind you that Mark and I are broadcasting from the Capital One virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? It's a good question to ask. What is in your wallet? By the way, now more than ever, don't you really kind of enjoy the cashless society that we're in? I don't want to put my hands on a screen or anything. Very happy just to, flip my phone and say, here, that's it. That's fine with me. Okay, Alex writes his subject, what to do with cash. That's good. Message. I have $50,000 invested in a CD that pays 3%. That's amazing. It's a 5-year term. Since the market is down right now, I'm thinking I should reinvest that money into stocks, possibly get a lot better return, at least while the market is recovering. Should I keep it in the CD or transfer it to some other investment? Is there other information that you need? Well, Alex, here's what I would like to know. Why did you put the money in cash to begin with? What was it about you and your life that, number one, you had 50 grand that was in a CD? So that's a lot of money to have in the CD. And more importantly, Alex, what was the ideal use of that money? What did you want to happen with that money? Was this your emergency reserve? Then you can't touch it. Is this just extra money and you didn't want to put it at risk? Then no, don't touch it. I need to understand why you had the money to begin with, what you thought you were going to need it for, and why you would change your mind right now, because I'm concerned we're trying to market time. Now, if you just threw it in there because you didn't know what to do and you're actually a long-term investor, maybe. But I need more information about you, about what this money is going to be used for, and how then we can best position it to take advantage of whatever opportunities are out there. By the way, 3% CD, kind of nice right now, huh? Pretty good. All right, that is it. That's our first hour. Now, stay tuned. What we are doing is we're trying to find some really uplifting past interviews that we have done. And coming up is, I think, Mark's all-time favorite interview that we've ever done on the program. So stay tuned. It's Jill on Money. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome back. It is hour number 2 of the Jill on Money show. And what we're trying to do is mix it up a little bit. We want to give you some encouragement. We want to make sure that you have something to chew on that I think will make you feel happy. And Mark went back into the archive and he found an interview that we conducted back in 2017. And this is with Admiral William McRaven, Bill McRaven. And at the time, he was the chancellor of the University of Texas. And it was so cool. He came into the studio. His wife was with us. And it was just such an inspirational long interview. And we were so just sort of gobsmacked with how normal he was and how generous he was with his time. It was terrific. So you may have heard him talk about his book, which is called Make Your Bed. That came after he had made a commencement speech at the University of Texas. He is a wonderful, wonderful patriot. McRaven was the mastermind behind the bin Laden raid, and we'll get into that during this interview. So here's our interview with Bill McRaven. This is going to be goofy because you are here and you're talking really amazing 10 steps that really will resonate with everybody listening, no matter who you are and what you do. But before we start the show, because this is sort of a money show, I like to ask a question for you. And we start it with, what is the best financial or career decision you ever made in your life?
Marrying my wife.
Nice. His wife is here, ladies and gentlemen. She's giving a thumbs up. And yeah, she was good. She kept you on the straight and narrow.
She kept me on the straight and narrow. And when you go through those rough moments in your life, it's great to have somebody like that to help you through them.
Describe just a little bit about having to present the president with options. Will he then say, Bill, What do you think? Or do you immediately say, here are your 5 options, this is what I think you should do?
No. At least with President Obama, and I have not met President Trump, so I can't speak to President Trump. But I'm sure the process is pretty much the same, which, again, the military leaders will come in and they will provide options. Now, if the president says, what is your number one option, then they're certainly prepared to provide that. But invariably, there's a dialogue, as there was with President Obama during the bin Laden raid. And I can tell you President Obama asked a lot of good questions, hard questions, compelling and probing questions. And my guess is President Trump did the same thing. He wanted to know, what are the risks involved? What are our chances of success? I mean, these are kind of natural questions that the president will ask the military leaders.
And so when President Obama asked some of those hard questions, give me an example of some of the, like, what would he have asked?
Well, the president always wants to know the risk to the force.
Right.
And I'm sure the same thing was asked from President Trump to Secretary Mattis. But in the case of the bin Laden raid, President Obama wanted to understand, okay, if I agree to this raid, then how much risk will be, what is the threat to your men on the ground? And how are you going to mitigate that risk? And so this is part of the plan that any military commander has to bring to a president is, force protection, get the mission done, make sure you're protecting the force as best you can, explain the risks to the president of the United States.
And is there ever a time where the president asked you a question and it made you rethink your position?
In the case of the bin Laden raid, yes. I mean, in terms of tightening up the planning on the mission, again, I gave the president kind of a broad option. Look, we'll do a helicopter raid. We'll get on the ground, but if we encounter the Pakistanis, we have this option, or this option. And so the president and myself and a number of members of the national security team talked through those and helped refine the plan. And my guess is, again, with President Trump, he had a discussion with his military leaders and potentially, tightened up the plan a little bit.
Was the bin Laden raid, which obviously it went in your direction, did you have apprehension about it?
No, never.
Really? How come?
No, because I knew what my forces were capable of doing. This was not a terribly complex mission. It was a long helicopter ride, about 162 miles from Afghanistan into Abbottabad, Pakistan. But I knew the SEALs were, highly trained. They were all combat veterans. The helicopter pilots were all combat veterans. We had, good overhead surveillance. We had appropriate packages in the event they got into trouble. So we had a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D. And I was very confident that we could carry out any one of those if we needed to. So no, I wasn't. Again, you're always worried about the safety of your troops. They're your men in this case, and I wanted them all to come back safely. But we also wanted to accomplish the mission. I was confident we could do both.
And you did it.
And we were fortunate. We did it. The guys did it.
The guys did it. That's pretty great. When I don't know why, but I always think that with and I told you before we went on the air that I have come married into a military family. And it was striking to me that it never seemed like our nephew would talk about being fearful. But you have to be afraid in these in various missions. What made you afraid along the way?
Yeah, I think, you have to be a little bit scared. Because that's kind of what keeps you on edge and keeps you looking for potential problem areas. Where are you going to get ambushed? How's the helicopter going to get from point A to point B? If you're not scared going into these missions, then you probably haven't been on them before. You ought to have a little bit of heightened sense of anxiety, and I think every operator does. But the flip side of that is you're very well trained. And you recognize that your training and the support you have from the other members of your team or the military are going to be there to help you out. So, whatever that apprehension is, I think, again, you can reduce some of that concern by realizing you've got great teammates.
All right, so when were you scared? Come on, come plain here. Besides,
I was scared a lot.
Were you scared walking down the aisle with this lovely lady?
Oh, no, that part never scared me. That was easy.
So what was scary? Give me an instance where you were like, oh, my God, I am scared.
Yeah, for me as a commander, again, during Iraq and Afghanistan, I wasn't, a frontline troop. So I didn't have to go out into combat every day like these, young Rangers, young Special Forces officers and NCOs, the SEALs, the Delta Force operators, the helicopter pilots, everybody that supported us. I mean, this 9/11 generation was in hard combat every day. My job was really to ensure we had a kind of a strategic and operational look at it. So most of the time I wasn't in harm's way day in and day out. Now, having said that, I'd try to go out on a mission with them about once a month just to make sure, one, they saw me as a combat leader that, wasn't afraid to take some risk, wasn't afraid to, endure the hardships that they had to endure. And that's important, I think, for any leader. Having said that, my greatest concerns were always to the troops on the ground, because every night we had overhead surveillance. We had predators that we could watch the action unfold in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, when you are back and you are watching these young men, sometimes in firefights, as good as they are, they're your troops. And so if I was ever concerned or anxious, it was always about the welfare of the troops, more in the middle of a combat situation than at any other time.
We'll get back to our interview with Bill McRaven in just a second. During the break, check out our website, JillOnMoney.com, and there you can actually sign up for our free newsletter. It's free. Fantastic. Okay, we'll be right back.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. Hey, Mark, you know what I forgot? I was so excited about the McRaven interview. I forgot to tell everybody that we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. All you have to do is go to policygenius.com. We are re-airing an interview that we conducted back in 2017 with Admiral Bill McRaven, William, to be specific. And I mentioned this at the top of the hour, which is that he was asked to do a commencement speech at the University of Texas. And that speech was amazing. It went viral. And the speech itself has so many good core concepts I think we could use all right now. From our perspective, for me and Mark, this was one of the highlights of the things that we've done for this radio show over the last decade or more, actually, now. So here's more of our interview with Bill McRaven.
Now to kind of shift gears. In 2014, you're delivering a commencement speech at the University of Texas, right?
Right.
And first of all, how did that come about? Who asked you to do that?
Well, the president of the university, Bill Powers, asked me to come do the commencement speech at my alma mater, the University of Texas at Austin, and I was thrilled to have the opportunity to do it. And it turned out to be just a fantastic night in Austin in May, and 8,000 students and about 20,000 of their parents and best friends. It was a great evening.
And from that commencement speech comes this slim, elegant, and really terrific book called Make Your Bed. Let's start with why you wanted to turn. First of all, by the way, everyone go and check out the speech because it's been downloaded 10 million times, something to that effect. But what made you want to turn it into a book?
Every day, literally every single day since the speech, Saturdays and Sundays included, somebody comes up to me and says, I make my bed. Or, I don't ring the bell. Or I don't back down from the sharks. But after they tell me that, then they always ask me, what was it that inspired you? Tell me about your experience as a sugar cookie. Tell me about how you, didn't back down. Or who were the people that inspired you? And, for several years, I was just busy, didn't have time to do it, and finally had an opportunity to. It's a small gift book, but I think it has broad appeal. This is not just a book for commencement. I think it's a book for anybody that goes through life that has to deal with failures, that has, great dark moments in life that they have to overcome. So the book was really about people that inspired me. And
let's just start with the number one, which is the title of the book, Make Your Bed. Why is making your bed so important?
Well, at least when I was being raised, my father was an Air Force officer, and my mother was a school teacher in Texas. And my mother ensured, more so than my father, that I made my bed every day. But as a young kid, you don't really understand why, other than your mom wanted you to make your bed. When I got to SEAL training, it was something that the SEAL instructors came in and inspected every day. And I didn't really understand it at first. Look, we're here to be, real SEAL warriors. Why are we worried about making our bed? And then all of a sudden, you have this epiphany, which is they recognize that it was kind of the first task of the day. And if you start off your day right by taking a little pride in making your bed, it's a simple task. And if you do it well, then other tasks will come, and then you'll complete the next task. And so it's kind of the first rung on the ladder in the course of your day. But the other thing about making your bed is it shows that if you do the little things well, then maybe you can do the bigger things well. And the SEAL instructors would make sure if you can't make your bed, if you can't make those hospital corners right, if you don't know how to put your wool blanket at the foot of the bed, if you can't take the time to make your bed correctly, how will you ever be a good SEAL running an important mission? So learn to do the little things right, and then that'll help you do the big things right.
Is there something about SEAL training that is different than any other part of the military? What differentiates the SEAL from, the guy who's in the Army? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I will tell you, I think almost all the Special Forces training are similar in terms of, there's a selection process where, you're looking for, in my case, they were all men. You're looking for men that you think are going to make it through training. You're trying to ensure that they have kind of the right stuff. All of the Special Forces training, the Ranger training, the SEAL training, I would say the thing that differentiates SEAL training is obviously the water. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my great Army brethren, didn't like the part about being cold, wet, and miserable. That doesn't make them any less tough. Let me tell you, I have seen some of the toughest men I've seen are Army Rangers and Army Green Berets, and we like to think SEAL training is the toughest military training out there. But I think all of them stack up as being pretty tough.
Yeah, it would seem so. So one of the other pieces of this, and as you go through and you give the little things that can change your life, you do talk about making sure that you have good teammates, right, and find someone to help you paddle. In the book also, you give some great examples in your own life. But I'm just wondering, in your not just career, but in your life, talk a little bit about the reliance on others, that team-based approach, because I do feel a tiny bit like sometimes that's lost in this current culture where everyone's sort of sitting alone at a screen, feeling disconnected. How do those connections really foster success?
Well, I talked a little bit about it in the speech, and then I kind of cull it out a little bit in the book. But when you go through SEAL training, you're giving what we refer to as an inflatable boat small. It's about an 8 to 10 foot little rubber raft, and you carry it everywhere you go. And the purpose of carrying the raft, it's a 7-man boat crew. But the purpose of carrying it isn't just to carry the boat. It's to recognize that if you're going to get the boat from point A to point B, everybody has to work together as a team. And I don't care whether you're the officer or the junior enlisted guy. If you don't paddle the way you're supposed to paddle, if you don't, stroke hard, if everybody doesn't dig in, then the boat won't get to where it needs to get to. And so the recognition as you go through SEAL training that, you better be a good teammate first. We're called the SEAL teams for a reason. And in fact, when you meet another guy in the SEAL teams, you say, hey, are you in the teams? And so this concept of being a team, everybody having a role to play for you to be successful is important. And then in the book, I talk about the fact that I had a parachute accident back in 2001. Up to that point in my career, I thought, like a lot of SEALs, that maybe I was a little invincible. I'd had some life-threatening situations in the air, underwater, and other places, and I'd always managed to get out of it, but not this time. And so I got pretty banged up in a free fall parachute jump. And frankly, I thought my career was over. I was banged up that badly. But fortunately, I had a lot of folks, my wife in particular, but my boss, Admiral Eric Olson, friends came by to see me, wished me well, helped me with my therapy, my physical therapy. And I would never be where I am today were it not for the fact that everybody came together to help me through that tough event in my life.
How did that change you going forward when you actually did get injured? Did you change? Did your mindset change about how you approached what you did or how you approached others?
I think, up to that point in time, I always recognized the value of team. But I was never the individual that kind of needed the help in terms of the other team helping me. That was a point in time where I went, I'm just as vulnerable as everybody else. Life can be very, very fragile. I mean, I realized that once again, my life was spared, and it all happened in an instant. I'd had a number of those in my career leading up to the parachute accident, but again, I'd always managed to do the right thing and gotten out of it. Now all of a sudden, I'm badly injured, and realize that, wow, moving forward, this is easier than I thought in terms of the potential to get injured. So after 9/11, this occurred before 9/11. After 9/11, as I watched my soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines and others, and saw the wounds that they suffered, you realize that you needed to be in a position, I needed to be in a position to help them, other people needed to be in a position to help them, because we all need people to help us get through life.
We'll get back to our interview with Bill McRaven in just a second. Hey, you know what you can do during the break? Why don't you buy his book, Make Your Bed? That's a good idea. And while you're at it, you can buy my book, which is called The Dumb Things Smart People Do With Their Money. Basic concepts we all need to know. All right, we'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are here to try to lift you up a little bit during this pandemic. It is really rough for so many people. I think that in this next section of our interview with Bill McRaven, you are going to see that all of us have to endure things. And as he points out, life is not fair sometimes. Ain't that the truth? Here's more of our interview with Bill McRaven.
That life's not fair is something that seems to have quite a bit of resonance in your world, because unfair things happen all the time.
You bet.
And how do you get through those unfair things?
Yeah, again, when we were going through training, there were a lot of folks that felt, if they were the best runner that day, then they would be rewarded for that. If they had the best uniform, they would be rewarded for that. There was this sense of, if I perform well, everything's going to fall into place. But it didn't. Right. And this concept of being a sugar cookie, as I refer to in the chapter, a sugar cookie was an instructor would just arbitrarily say, McRaven, hit the surf. You had to hit the surf, get all wet, then roll around in the sand, and so you're covered head to toe in sand. And, there was a time when you said, why? My uniform looked good. Everything was great. Mm-hmm. I should be rewarded for that. And the point was, sorry, life isn't fair. You're not always going to be rewarded for things. And so this understanding as you go through life that, life isn't fair. You have to get over it. And you can't spend your time, blaming your parents or blaming your circumstances or blaming your bosses. Life's not fair. But if you press on, if you accept the fact that every once in a while things are going to just go, not go your way, get over it and move on.
And does that mean, though, as a boss, because you're a boss of a lot of people, that that you don't? I mean, really bad things happen. That's one thing. Right. But like when somewhat bad things, are you hardened to that? In other words, I don't know. Like I'm feeling like in the military, that's a lesson. Like, of course you have to move on. Like we have a mission here. But in an organization, like I'm working at CBS, and like, a story gets killed. Life's not fair. Move on. And you've just spent hours and hours doing this, and it is true. But do you get to sit on your pity pot for like 5 minutes?
Yeah, probably everybody does for a few minutes, that's just human nature. But the point is, don't sit on it for too long.
Yeah.
Like I said, sometimes you bust your tail and things just don't work out well.
Can you talk a little bit about failure? Because I never associate, I guess, military and failure as, how you come through that. Because I feel like sometimes failure can result in the loss of life and injury. Right. And so how do you come on the other side of that? That's a much more difficult thing than saying, oh, well, life's unfair. Failure is a big deal.
Failure is a big deal, particularly in a combat situation. Fortunately, by the time I was in combat after 9/11, I was a pretty seasoned SEAL officer. I'd been in about 26 years, and I'd had a number of failures, not combat related, but a number of failures in my career. And you do the best to show that you're better than your failure. But when it comes to combat, your failures can, in fact, result in the deaths of civilians, unfortunately, and some of your soldiers. But what you have to realize is you have to learn from your mistakes, and particularly in combat. You're going to make mistakes. Combat moves at a pace that you don't control sometimes. We always say that the enemy has a vote, so you can build a great plan, but the enemy may not react the way you expected, and unfortunately, every once in a while, you'll lose guys. But a good combat leader recognizes that, you can't sit on your pity pot too long. You have to say, what did I learn from that? How are we going to do better next time? But you have to be prepared to make the next tough decision as a combat leader. And I think the difference between a great combat leader and a good combat leader is the great ones overcome failure as quickly as possible. They learn from it, and then they make the next tough decision. Because if you're not prepared to make the next tough decision, then you're going to lose more young men and women. And so that's the important thing to recognize in combat.
You just talked about the difference between good and great. So who inspired you in your career?
Oh, a lot of people inspire me in my career. But I will tell you, invariably, probably not who people think. The kids that inspired me were the young soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines I met, the ones that had families with kids. And you'd watch these young soldiers go overseas and come back, and then 8 months later they're back overseas again, and they do it year after year after year. And the wife stays at home and takes care of the kids, or the husband stays at home in some cases and takes care of the kids as the wife is forward. These are the men and women that I think are truly inspiring, and they don't, nobody writes books about them. They're not going to have any monuments built to them, but they are, the American soldier. And so, they're what's really inspiring.
What don't we civilians really understand about the military life? What are some of the things we just don't get and we could never get?
Well, I don't know that you could never get it, but the military life is a life of sacrifice. You don't go into the military. A lot of people say, well, why'd you go in the military? And people will say, well, to serve my country. And certainly people want to serve their country. But most young men and women that go into the military, I think initially there's this kind of sense of a challenge. I want to make it through basic training, or I want to make it through SEAL training or Ranger training. And then there's a little sense of adventure. You go from a challenge to an adventure, and now, you're in the SEALs. And in my case, you're traveling around the world, you're jumping out of airplanes, you're locking out of submarines. You have this adventure, and then at some point in time in your career, it kind of becomes a profession. But then after that, it becomes a calling. And that's really kind of when you hit your peak. For me, the calling really came after 9/11. What I saw with the young men and women that came in right after 9/11 was, they jumped, my 26 years, and within a short period of time, they had gone from the challenge, the adventure, the profession to a calling. And that calling required sacrifice. And so it's just hard to appreciate the sacrifice of these young soldiers day in and day out going on combat missions, year after year deploying, every couple of years moving their family from one geographic location to the next, and now their kids have got to make new friends in school. These are the sacrifices, but I will tell you, almost any soldier you talk to will tell you that they are happy to sacrifice that. They love the job they're doing. They're proud to serve this nation, and so we're happy to bear that burden and bear that sacrifice.
We'll get back to our interview with Bill McRaven in just a minute. During the break, here's something that you can do. you can go onto the website, jillonmoney.com, and just bookmark it so you have it. Then you can go back later. You can read the stuff that we've written. You can listen to past shows. You can watch TV segments, and you can check out the resource section, which has been beefed up. Really interesting stuff that Mark's put on there. So check it out, jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger helps you take the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and in this hour, we are re-airing an interview we conducted a few years ago with Admiral William McRaven. If you don't get inspired by this guy, you're not listening, right? This is a person who has been through incredible hardship. The thing we want to leave you with in this interview is the note of optimism that McRaven really does sound. He really does inspire all of us to rise to the occasion. So let's keep that in mind. Check out the end of our interview with Bill McRaven, and we are just so honored that he graced us a few years back. Here's the last part of our interview.
You talk about rising to the occasion, and I feel like, you're in this dangerous place, and you're trained in a certain way. You are going to rise to the occasion. But how do civilians rise to the occasion in your lives? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, sometimes I think it's just something deep, deep inside that comes up when a dark moment occurs. I don't know that you can plan for it. I don't know that you can prepare for it. I don't know that even the soldiers I've met fully prepare for it. When you lose a loved one, I don't care whether you lose them on the battlefield or you lose them in a car accident or they die of cancer. You find out really who you are in those dark moments. And I think we all have it inside us. And the point of the book is, you don't have to be a superhero to rise to the occasion. But dig deep. It's in there. And the people around you are going to need you to rise to that occasion when bad things happen. So this is more of a hope that people that read the book will realize that they have it within themselves to be this person when difficult things happen.
In your career, as you look back, were you able to identify people who you said, that guy, that woman, that's a leader?
Absolutely.
Easily?
Pretty easily. Yeah.
And what are some of those attributes that would make you poised to be a leader?
Yeah, they are generally people persons. They understand how to build a team, as we talked about. They recognize that it's not about them. They are kind of a servant leader. I mean, I think the great leaders are servant leaders. I love this saying from Pope Francis that, a shepherd should smell like his sheep. And I think, we have learned that in the military, that great leaders are the ones that are out with the troops. And I don't care whether you're a non-commissioned officer, to be a great leader, you've got to be out. You've got to suffer the hardships. You have to lead from the front, as we say. Sometimes leading from the front is literally jumping out of the airplane first. Sometimes leading from the front is being the last in the chow line to get chow. But leading from the front means setting the example and doing the difficult things. You don't have to be the best at everything. In fact, great leaders are rarely the best at everything. But they've got to respect the people that work for them. They've got to be able to build the team around them. And you can see that pretty quickly. I mean, there are some folks that are a little too full of themselves, that think they always have the right plan, that they're the smartest man or woman in the room. Those people you have to be a little bit careful of. Now, every once in a while, they turn out to be great leaders as well, but I tell you, more times than not, it's that man or woman who knows how to build a team, who is the servant leader, who respects the people that work for them, and who sets the example and does things that are moral, legal, and ethical.
When you look at, say, corporate America now, and you maybe read stories in the papers about this CEO does this or this malfeasance of that, I can only imagine that somebody like you, a true leader who's selfless in many ways, that really must pain you in some ways to read stories or hear things like that.
Well, we're not perfect in the military, but I think as an organization, we work hard to instill the right values in people. And I think most of the men and women I've worked with in the military adhere to those values. But, again, I have one litmus test for every decision we make. And as I said, you have to do things that are moral, legal, and ethical. And if your decision, passes that litmus test, then it's probably a good decision. And most leaders know when things aren't moral, legal, or ethical. It's not always easy to be good, though. The circumstances that swirl around you sometimes, nobody's perfect. And again, we're going to make mistakes. And sometimes, as hard as you try to be moral, legal, and ethical, it doesn't work out. And we talk about your integrity being the most important thing, but frankly, you're the only one that can lose your integrity, and it happens sometimes. Again, that's a time when you just have to say, "Look, I made a mistake. I'm going to figure out how to do better next time and move on."
Now that you are out of the military and in academia, which is a whole nother universe.
I love it.
How has the transition been?
Transition's been great. I'm used to running a large organization. So in my role as the chancellor of the University of Texas system, I'm the CEO over these 14 institutions. And we were talking before the beginning of the broadcast about UT Austin. But of course, that is our flagship, but it is hardly the only institution. We have 8 academic institutions and then 6 health-related institutions. And we've got 6 medical schools. But I got to tell you, the best thing about the job is looking at these, first in family to go to college. We have a large Hispanic population in Texas and down at UT Rio Grande Valley and University of Texas El Paso and UT San Antonio. You see these kids that are the first in their family ever to go to school. And you realize they have just changed the entire trajectory of their family forever. Because, what statistics show is if you go to college, chances are very high your kids are going to go to college and their kids are going to go to college. And everything about going to college, frankly, makes you a better person. Statistically speaking, not only do you make more money, but you're less likely to be racist and bigoted, and you're going to be healthier. Everything about spending time on a college campus is actually good for human beings.
Well, I'm going to thank Bill McRaven again for coming in a few years back, and I hope you enjoyed that interview. When we return, just a quick question and a wrap-up that we can help you out with. And you know what? Go back and listen to the parts of this interview if you missed any of it. It really will make you feel better. We are here to lift you up, so this is part of that process. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. During the break, Mark and I were just talking about how businesses are likely to change, and pretty dramatically. I just don't think that there's going to be as much business travel. And, as we look forward, maybe we don't need to be traveling that much. That would be good for the economy. For the environment, wouldn't it? Maybe the funny and nice silver lining is that what we're learning is that we can do quite a bit at home. We might actually become more productive, and we might help save the planet. Not a bad thing in the weekend after Earth Day, right? All right, let's finish up the show with a question from Bill, who says, I appreciate your help. This is my first direct question, though you've answered many of my questions while I've been listening to you. I have a 20-year-old college student who is my dependent. I received my stimulus payment, but I did not receive $500 for him. Does he have to sign up with the IRS? Am I supposed to be doing something extra? He has never filed taxes. He has worked and paid taxes during the summer. Hopefully, I've given you enough info. Yes, you have, and you're not going to like this answer. I'm so sorry. You're not getting $500 for this guy. He's got to be under the age of 17. And if you claim him as a dependent, you don't get the $500 check, which I think is dumb. I thought the stimulus payment, first of all, I thought they should have given you $1,200 for each kid. And it should have been, if your kid is under the age of blank, like 23, I don't know. It seemed to me that was a big miss. So I'm sorry, man. You don't get it. That's it. That's a bad way to end. But anyway, okay, gang, this is the end of the program. If you've got a question throughout the week, remember, email us, askjill@jillonmoney.com. If you want to catch our daily podcast, it's called Jill on Money, and we are calling it the Jill on Money Coronavirus Market Update. Every single day we are broadcasting, so please check that out. And know that we are here to lift you up Do something nice for each other. Wash your hands. Maintain your social distancing. Be good and stay healthy. We'll talk to you next weekend.